Yeah.
I want you, though, I would love for you, because you've been doing this for so long and I've been in this for so long, love for you to, take a step back. Forget about what happened last night. Forget about what happened the night before. Let's look at the last month and try to put into perspective for people who may just now be focusing on politics how extraordinary this past month has been in American politics.
It will be a month in American politics that is being discussed 50 years from now in discussions like this. It will be the one that people will be comparing other stunning events in the future that we don't know about that might happen. And they'll say, well, remember, in 2024, there was that amazing moment where Joe Biden decided not to run, and 27 minutes later, he endorsed his vice president for the nomination. And really, that was all it took to create what happened here. When you really see how that day unfolded, the Clintons endorsed about an hour after Joe Biden. That nomination was locked in within 90 minutes after Joe Biden decided that he wasn't going to run. Formally, it took over 24 hours for Kamala Harris to actually assemble formal commitments from the number of delegates it would take for her to get it. But the nomination in a day, that's what her campaign for the nomination ended up being. And that's very clearly what Joe Biden wanted, because all of the discussions about Joe Biden dropping out, they always included what, for me, sounded like an element of chaos, a large element of chaos. And then let's go find a candidate. There were preposterous suggestions like turning Bill Clinton and Barack Obama into talk show hosts who would host shows inviting a few of these candidates who they would select, crazy stuff that could never happen. You wouldn't have had a nominee on Monday night. You wouldn't have had a nominee on Tuesday night. We don't know how many ballots it would take to get one. And I think what Joe Biden saw in all of those discussions was, if I step down, I have to prevent chaos. And that endorsement was the thing that prevented the chaos. It put everything on track to everything you're seeing now.
Let me ask you this question as well. In all your years in politics, have you ever seen a political figure surprise, stun critics, even supporters, as much as Kamala Harris? The only comparison I have is Ronald Reagan, who somehow, overnight turned from a B-list actor and a clown into, according to his critics' perception of him, to a guy that won landslides and started a political revolution or counter-revolution.
Right. And it wasn't overnight.
Right.
There was the governorship. There was more than one there's more than one attempt by him to get the Republican nomination.
And I will say, too, there's such a great...
And the same thing with Kamala Harris. It wasn't overnight.
There was the 76 convention speech when Gerald Ford made the worst mistake ever by saying, come on down, Ronald Reagan, I've just beaten you, but come on down and speak. And then Reagan gave one of the great speeches in Republic. So you're right. This is like the Beatles were not an overnight sensation. They played in Hamburg 20 hours a night.
So here's what's true about the comparison. I certainly didn't take Ronald Reagan seriously before he got the Republican nomination for president. And he was maneuvering for it for beginning in 1968, he was trying to get that nomination. He was the long shot, in Miami in that convention. And I think people who were not watching Kamala Harris closely have been very surprised by this, especially because there's been a media coverage of her as vice president, which I always found completely preposterous, saying she was somehow failing at a job that doesn't have any job description other than showing up at the Senate when we need your vote. I've known her since 2009, since she was the San Francisco district attorney. I had some people in L.A. say to me, hey, come and meet the female Obama. And I didn't know who this was. And I went to a law firm in Century City, about a dozen lawyers listening to this San Francisco DA. I listened to her for about 10 minutes, and I think, oh, okay, this is the female Obama. Yeah. This is the one who can become president of the United States. So I've been completely unsurprised. I knew she would go from San Francisco DA to something statewide. It turned out to be Attorney General. I firmly believed she was going to win that race. Turned out to be a real squeaker because Karl Rove very much tried to stop her at that campaign. The Republicans were worried about her winning the Attorney General race statewide in California because they saw, Karl Rove saw how powerful she could be as a campaign presence, and they didn't want to see her win statewide in California. Then that obviously led to her Senate election, and here we are.
And it's interesting, Karl Rove, actually one of the voices now in 2024, who keeps trying to warn Republicans, you don't know what's coming at you, and you better stop underestimating it. I think it's brilliant what he says. He says Republicans usually stand in line, Democrats fall in line. Democrats, he said, this is the first time in my life I've seen them fall in line while they were falling in love.
Exactly. That's an incredible comment on his part. So.
And joining us now, NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. So, Steve, talk to me about the poll numbers. What might RFK's dropping out and endorsing Trump do?
Yeah, small but potentially significant. I mean, that's the story in a close election. Take a look at it this way. Here's the polling before Kamala Harris became the Democratic candidate, the three-way polling. And, you know, Kennedy, on average, this is nationally, had been running just over 9%. You see, Trump had been leading Biden. Now, Biden gets out of the race. Harris replaces him. Here's what you got. This is basically an average of a month's worth of polls now. And obviously, you got Harris taking the lead over Trump, improving on Biden. At the same time, there it is. Kennedy, as Vaughn was just saying, dropping in the polls from an average of over 9 to barely 5 points, almost cut in half his support there. Now, here's the interesting part. Harris in the three-way polls right now, leading Trump. You can see there that difference between Harris and Trump is 2.7 points. What if you take Kennedy out of the equation? What do the polls show that are just Harris versus Trump? The average of those polls, it's this. Harris continues to lead, but the margin's reduced. Again, it's 2.7 points for Harris on average in three-way polls. It is 1.6 for Harris on average in national two-way polls, a difference of 1 point. So when we say small but potentially significant, again, we're talking about, think of 2020, Georgia 12,000 votes, Arizona 10,000 votes, Wisconsin 20,000 votes. A 1 point difference in places like that could potentially be enormous in a close race like that. And what's particularly interesting is, again, we see Harris's support rising since she got in and Kennedy's falling. Seems to be a pretty clear relationship there in some cases. Two groups that Kennedy has fallen the most with, two groups of voters, are the two groups that Harris has risen the most with. Show you this. Latino voters. Kennedy had been polling fairly well there when Biden was the Democratic candidate. He's dropped 9 points of support among Latinos in the same stretch of time. Harris has gained 12 points over where Joe Biden was running. Young voters, those under 30. Again, Kennedy had been polling strongly here, fallen 8 points since Kamala Harris became the Democratic candidate. Meanwhile, voters under 30, Harris is doing 17 points better than Biden. So it certainly seems that when you see Kennedy's overall support dropping, there was a kind of Democratic-friendly share of the Kennedy vote that wasn't there for Biden that is now there for Harris. That's reduced the Kennedy vote to what you're seeing. And what's left of the Kennedy vote maybe is a little bit more Trump-friendly. And so if Kennedy leaves, the potential certainly seems to be there for Trump to benefit a little. But, of course, it's politics. It's all potential. It's all possibility. We'll see how it actually plays out.
Yeah, and the last few elections, coming down to a few thousand votes in a handful of places could be significant. Steve Kornacki. Steve, thank you.
Got it.
And Vice President Kamala Harris, the first Asian American to top a major presidential ticket, has now released her first two ads focusing on Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander voters.
Asian Americans are the fastest growing segment of voters. They're expected to make up over 6% of eligible voters in November.
NBC's Priya Sridhar joins us now from Atlanta. And Priya, you met with some Asian American voters there in Georgia. What did you learn?
Yeah, that's right. Well, this is an extremely important voting bloc. Indian Americans make up the largest subgroup when we talk about Asian American voters and the second largest immigrant group in the United States behind Mexicans. And one thing I can tell you after speaking to Indian American voters here in battleground Georgia is that they're extremely enthusiastic about this election cycle.
Tonight, Kamala Harris is set to make history. The first Black and South Asian woman to accept her party's nomination for president.
My mother raised us to be proud, strong Black women. And she raised us to know and be proud of our Indian heritage.
From Harris to Usha Vance, wife of Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance.
Although he's a meat and potatoes kind of guy, he adapted to my vegetarian diet and learned to cook food from my mother.
And earlier Republican contenders Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley, Indian Americans are having a moment in American politics. Georgia voter Jasmina Chabra couldn't be more excited about Harris.
The minute that VP Harris was nominated, I felt a sudden surge. It was extraordinary to think that she is a South Asian woman, a woman of color.
Energized both by the candidate and her stance on women's rights and equity.
I'm going to spend the next 90+ days doing whatever it is that I possibly can to be part of this historic movement.
Now she's phone banking, writing postcards, and even getting her 11-year-old daughter, Anya, in on the grassroots action.
Georgia's a swing state, and I just really wanted to get involved.
The Chabras are part of a newly fired-up Indian American electorate. A recent South Asian Women for Harris Zoom call raised $300,000 from 9,000 attendees, according to organizers. Leaders say they've seen a surge of volunteer signups and donations, along with memes and merch touting Lotus for POTUS, playing off Kamala's name, which means lotus in Sanskrit. Experts say this type of energy matters, especially in battleground states like Georgia.
In a close race, Asian Americans can make a difference. And Indian Americans, as the largest national origin group within the Asian American population in the state, are really poised to have a big impact on 2024.
In Georgia, the Asian American voter turnout rate has been increasing more rapidly than Latino, Black, and white voters. According to AAPI data, Indian Americans account for 72,000 eligible voters in a state that flipped from red to blue by just 12,000 votes in 2020. Equally energized is Republican Karthik Bhatt.
President Trump's fundraising.
Bhatt immigrated from India at 19 and went from working at a grocery store to owning this shopping plaza in suburban Atlanta. He's even run for local office.
When we came America give us chance.
He says issues like the border and economy, not identity, are why he's fundraising for Trump.
Mostly my Asian community owns the small businesses. Everybody are struggling with the money.
One thing Bhatt and Chabra agree on, this election feels different.
So more Asian Americans are getting involved.
Yeah, more people are involved.
I think it's important, very simply put, when you have South Asian children and they see somebody that looks like them, to be in those positions, to inspire them.
That was Priya Shrestha reporting.
Thank
you so much, Priya.
Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro also took the stage for a speech focused on protecting freedom. Shapiro, who was a finalist to be Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate, partly used his time last night to rail against former President Donald Trump, who he said is trying to strip Americans of their rights. Take a look.
Kamala Harris, well, she has spent her entire career making progress. Donald Trump, a man with no guardrails, wants to take away our rights and our freedoms. And listen, while he cloaks himself in the blanket of freedom, what he's offering isn't freedom at all. Because hear me on this, it's not freedom to tell our children what books they're allowed to read. No, it's not. And it's not freedom to tell women what they can do with their bodies. And hear me on this, it sure as hell isn't freedom to say you can go vote, but he gets to pick the winner. That's not freedom. Kamala and Tim's names may be on the ballot, but it's your rights. It's our rights. It's our future and freedoms that are on the line. And you have the power to shape the future of this country. Just like our ancestors who fought for freedom on the battlefield and sat in at lunch counters so our kids could stand up. Now it's on us. It's on us, my friends, to organize in our communities and on our For You pages around 3 basic American principles.
Can I do one edit? Tim, is it okay if I do one edit as a former Republican? Because they're they're trying to speak
but
to
that was really good.
Conservatives. Josh Shapiro is great.
Amazing.
I want him to be vice president. I made that very clear. I just want to do one edit that every time I hear it, as a former Republican, it kind of, I was like,
Abortion?
No. When he says it's not freedom to tell children what books they can read. It should be, it's not freedom to tell parents what books their children can read.
That's a good edit.
There's a big difference.
It's a good edit.
It's a good edit.
Because some of these books that are like out there are books that we would not want our children to read.
Yeah.
But it should be the parents' decision and not the governor's decision.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, good edit.
Yeah, I think that's a fair edit. I'll send it through to Governor
Okay,
Shapiro.
if you can send it through.
I'll send it through to
Like
Steve.
hours and hours of programming, you've come up with an edit.
It's all just one. But Donnie, you know, we were both of us. You and I were both in the Shapiro cheering section.
Wonderful.
And wanted him to be the vice presidential pick. But man, I've been surprised by how good Tim Walz has been. I'm just really shocked, actually. What about you?
People don't realize that Joe fields a lot of hysterical calls from a lot of people, including me. And when they didn't pick Shapiro, I was like, he made a mistake. They didn't make a mistake. Walz has been, Shapiro's amazing, but Walz has been the right pick. And, he talked about being a neighbor, and there's a great slogan, where, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Like a good neighbor, Tim Walz is there.
Yeah.
He is that guy.
The whole plaid shirt thing.
And I'll tell you also the other
good.
emotional moment for me when his son was standing crying and pointing and going, that's my dad up there. That's my, if you're a son, if you're a father, if you're anybody, you could not react to that. But Tim Walz has been a revelation. He is a rock star. I am just blown away by him.
Yeah, he really is. Following that speech, Trump attacked Shapiro on social media, referring to him as, quote, the highly overrated Jewish governor of Pennsylvania. He went on to add, quote, I have done more for Israel than any person, and it's not even close. Shapiro has done nothing for Israel and never will. And Willie Geist, it's always helpful to your campaign when you attack the governor of a state you desperately need.
Yeah, by the way, and identify him as the highly overrated Jewish governor.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of these moments we talk about, guys, where people go, oh, there he goes again. No. Let's stop for a minute. The man who wants to be president again is calling Josh Shapiro a Jewish governor, sending up smoke signals to some of his supporters. And he's lost his ability, if he ever had it, Caddy, to use innuendo. And now he's just coming out and saying these things absolutely out loud about Josh Shapiro. He's Jewish, so take what he says with a grain of salt. It's staggering.
There's been quite a lot of focus on Tim Walz and did he actually go to war? And he said he carried a weapon in war and he didn't actually go to war. And it's probably right that the man who is going to be the vice president of the United States has some scrutiny on him. But every time we go to scrutiny like that, you have to remind yourself of some of the things that Donald Trump will say and make no bones about it. And he will identify Josh Shapiro not as the governor, not as the great governor, not as the effective governor, but as the Jewish governor, and making him then part of another group. And it's not even a dog whistle at this point. It's a bullhorn. It's out there and it's blunt. I mean, by the way, he has a habit of attacking governors of states that he needs to win. So Pennsylvania, Georgia. I mean, is he going to start ticking off the list? I'm not quite sure what he's going to start saying about the governors of Nevada and Arizona soon, but they should start watching their bags.
I'm so glad you said that. Donald Trump's talking about Governor Brian Kemp, the extraordinarily popular governor in the state of Georgia.
And attacking his wife as well, apparently, which that's really not gone down well in Georgia.
And Governor Kemp's sin is saying, no, the count was right in 2020 in our state. We supported Donald Trump. I voted for him, but we got the vote right, and that's his sin. Donald Trump continues to flail. We see it right there, the anti-Semitism in that post. Also yesterday at his rally, just again, meandering, making up a story about Kamala Harris meeting with Vladimir Putin 3 days before Putin decided to go into Ukraine. That meeting never took place. He's just making stuff up again.
No, in the days before the invasion, Vice President Harris met with President Zelensky of Ukraine at the Munich Security Conference as part of delivering messages like, look, this invasion is about to come, showing the important role she did play in President Biden's foreign policy. The Trump thing, yesterday he had this rally in North Carolina, as you said, and at one point he even polled the crowd and said, well, you know, my advisors want me to stick to policy. You know, the Obamas, they got personal. Should I do the same? And he asked the crowd what they think, and they, of course, all cheered to say, yes, you should go on personal attacks. And then hours later, he does this inflammatory post on Truth Social. And it's a reminder, actually, Simone, there is a current here about Trump. And I thought one of the more powerful moments last night, it was searing to see, is the January 6th footage. And Congressman Benny Thompson introduced it. It was really sort of difficult to watch. And we've all lived with this, and we talk about January 6th nearly every day. This is the first election post-January 6th, the first presidential election post-January 6th. And that matters. And I think the Democrats were smart, even if they're moving away from the, hey, Trump's a threat to democracy line a little bit, but they're smart to remind people just how dangerous he was and how he's laying the groundwork to potentially do it again.
The footage is very important, I think, to play, because a lot of folks, if you just think about it, there are a lot of people that maybe have tuned out, maybe have forgotten, given all the misinformation and disinformation from Republicans, specifically on Capitol Hill. And so seeing the footage matters because it was terrible. No one, and reminding people that this is what it was the last January 6th when Donald Trump sent his supporters out and told them to march on the Capitol. And so I do think it's very important. Look, I know that there's all this harping on, Democrats aren't leaning into the threat to democracy anymore. But I think that talking about the stakes of this election gets that done in a way that everyone can still understand, because democracy, to be honest, people feel differently about it. You know, for some folks, democracy has never fully worked for them in this country, so they don't feel as though that message of democracy speaks to them. But the stakes, everybody understands that, and they're high.
75 days in a wake-up for us to prove what Americans can do when the pressure is on. 75 days in a wake-up for us to show that true patriots do not whine and complain. We put our heads down and we get to work. 75 days and a wake-up to build a future that those who came before us hope for, and those who come after us that they deserve. And 75 days and a wake-up to elect a leader who is willing to believe in the best of us, and that leader is Kamala Harris, the next president of the United States.
As Maryland Governor Wes Moore speaking last night here at the United Center in support of Vice President Kamala Harris, and Governor Moore joins us now here in Chicago. Governor, great to see you.
Great to see you too. Good morning.
Good morning. Can we talk first just about the vibe in this place over the last week and over the last month, really, of this campaign, and how things, quite frankly, have changed, which was... There was a talk after the debate, should Joe Biden stay? Should he get out of the race? A lot of people thought he should stay, and let's hang in with him and see if we can't get him across the finish line. Just that energy within the party has changed, and you feel it in this, as you felt up close last night.
Yeah, I mean, this energy is real. And I think what this energy is, this is an energy that's ready to win. And there is a difference. There's a difference between folks who actually see and believe that victory is within reach, because it also means that you have folks here who are ready to do the work. I mean, the great thing about being here right now is not just that the rallies are great and the energy is wonderful and everything is really loud. It's the fact that these are all people who are now going to be going back to Indiana and Mississippi and Missouri and Maryland and who are ready to go put in the work. That's the thing that you want to see coming in, especially when we now only have, now 74 days in a wake up.
One of the things that's notable, and we're looking at these USA signs in the photos here, and we've been talking about a lot this week, is talking about patriotism. Right. And you've kind of been at the forefront of that, going back to your campaign saying Republicans don't own patriotism. Just because you got a bigger flag and you wave it on the back of your truck or put a sticker on your truck. It's about embodying the values of the country. You, of course, served in Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne. How important is that to you and to this party to talk about patriotism in a different kind of way?
I think there was a real danger that we had as Democrats of shying away from it, of being afraid to put the American flag, in your yard, a fear of saying I'm a very proud American. Because the thing I wanted people to know is that saying that I'm a proud American, and I love my country, I love this flag, I have fought for it, and I will fight for it for the rest of my life. I think it has been the world's greatest experiment. I also know this, that doesn't mean I'm naive. That doesn't mean I'm ignoring our history. Our history has been very uneven. I get that. And the thing that I know I really wanted to speak to last night were the skeptics. Were the people who said, listen, how can you love America if X, or how can you love America if Y? My point is this, I'm not asking you to parking lot your skepticism or your a measure of cynicism you might have. All I'm saying is bring that skepticism with you. But let that skepticism be your companion and not your captor. Don't let it remove you from the process. Let it actually be your fuel to continue making this great American experiment better. That is patriotism. The people who are willing to sacrifice for a better America, the people who are willing to defend the people to their left and the right, regardless of what their family lineage might be. That's the beauty of what makes America so special. And I think as Democrats, it's not just a smart political thing to do. It's the right moral thing to do. We love this country. We'll fight for it.
So last night was Tim Walz's night. We learned about him as a teacher, as a coach, his time in the military. You know him as a fellow governor, Governor of Minnesota. You're at Maryland. Tell us your experiences working with him. What do you think he adds to the ticket?
I love this dude. I'm telling you, he is like, the thing about Tim Walz is what you see is what you get. There's no airs with him. This is not performative. He doesn't get up there and put on a show. He is Coach Walz, whether he is in a back room or whether he is on a big stage. And, one of the things I've always loved about him is not just his military service. I mean, this is a guy who's a 24-year military veteran, rose to the rank of sergeant major, which less than 1% of people do. But I remember him even as President Biden was going through the process of thinking about what he wanted to do. I was having very in-depth and deep conversations with Tim Walz, and he was having very in-depth conversations with President Biden. And he would always stand there and say, but our job is to stick and be loyal and making sure that we're pushing forward the right agenda for the country. Keep the country first in this. And I love him for that, and I will stand with him always. I think he's going to be a remarkable vice president.
Nico, we saw last night, this party has fallen in love over the last couple of weeks with Governor Walz. Governor Moore says he saw it a long time before a lot of people did, which is this is a guy who can help the ticket and help the country.
These governors are amazing, and there are so many. What a great and groundbreaking bench the Democrats have. When you look at California, Maryland, Wes Moore, your speech was amazing last night. Pennsylvania's Josh Shapiro and everything that he brings to the table. North Carolina, Massachusetts, the great Maura Healey, who's the first openly gay female governor. And Donnie, it just doesn't make any sense to me that Donald Trump would go after a swing state governor, a state that he needs to win, at a time when it looks like his chances could be in jeopardy.
Donald Trump sent out an offensive tweet about Josh Shapiro, calling him the highly overrated Jewish governor. Imagine saying a highly overrated black governor. He throws out these anti-Semitic tropes and said that he's not good for Israel. I'm so tired of Donald Trump trying to divide Jews. 75% of Jews traditionally vote Democrat. I think they'll even hit it farther this time. It's vile, it's anti-Semitic, and I get offended as a Jew personally.
Yeah. So,
Wes, let me go to you. Wes, first of all, congratulations on your great success, my friend. I mean, you are one of the stars of the future of this party. So, you're out there, and are you feeling that the electorate is tired of the negativity and tired of the name calling and the very thing that's happening in the Democratic convention, the joy, the excitement, the exuberance? That's what people want across the aisle.
I think this country, by its nature, is a hopeful country. I think that this country is a country that understands the power, that there's a healing power to American democracy. And when you look at the origins of it, that America was founded on this idea that every 2 or 4 or 6 years, depending on the race, we have a chance to choose our fate. And Americans generally choose hope. They choose optimism. They choose the thing that's going to lead us to our better angels. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing. And I think people are seeing that, the shell game of Donald Trump is very tired. And it's very tiring. He is not a policy guy. He is a vessel. He is a vessel for an ideology that believes that patriotism means separating us, and that means making America great again is telling who should be a part of that experiment and who should not be. But Donald Trump is nothing more than a vessel for that. And I think people are seeing that we have a real opportunity to be able to have an economy that everyone feels a part of. We have an opportunity to have a country that is respected on the global stage. We have a chance to actually have a country that can do big and bold things and know that we need everybody involved in it. That's what the people are hoping for. And I know that, and people believe and they know that Donald Trump is not going to get us there. And he has no plan to get us there. That's not his intention. So this is actually an exciting moment because I think it represents what every single election represents for the American people. A choice about who we are and about who we hope to be.
Governor, obviously Donald Trump denigrates immigrants whenever he gets the chance. One of the points you made in your speech last night, tying it to the collapse of the Key Bridge after that terrible accident earlier this year, was the people who were working on that bridge and what they saw in the promise of America.
I remember even speaking to those families and speaking to them in Spanish. That first morning when we were letting these 6 families know that we were, at that point, it was a search and rescue mission, and then eventually turned into just a recovery mission. And I think about those men often who were fixing potholes at 180 feet in the air in the middle of the night so we could have a smoother commute in the morning. People who weren't born in this country, many who did not even yet speak English, but who believed that the hope of America was big enough for the hopes for their families too. And one of the things that we actually did in the wake of the collapse of the Key Bridge, we actually established a scholarship for their children to make sure that their families and their children knew that we appreciated their loved ones, their fathers, their brothers, their uncles, their cousins. We appreciated their service. We appreciated their love of country and their love of community, and we were going to make sure that they weren't going to be forgotten nor left behind in this.
Maryland Governor Wes Moore, who has served this country since he was, I think, 17 years old, right?
That's right.
Appreciate you being here this morning, Governor. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
In the words of Vice Presidential nominee Coach Walz, it's the fourth quarter and we're driving down the field because in just over 2 hours, right there in Chicago, the final night of the Democratic National Convention kicks off with another powerhouse lineup. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly and his wife, former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, Senator Elizabeth Warren, who will be joining us later this hour, former Republican Congressman and January 6th Select Committee member Adam Kinzinger, performances by Pink and the Chicks, and of course, the main event, Vice President Kamala Harris, who will formally accept her party's nomination for president later tonight. It comes on the heels of last night's reminder of the Democratic Party's deep and gifted political bench. Secretary Pete Buttigieg, Governor Josh Shapiro, Governor Wes Moore all gave speeches, and how better to celebrate the political phenomenon that is Kamala Harris and Tim Walz than with the cultural touchstone that is one Oprah Winfrey, who, of course, took us to church as only Oprah Winfrey can.
This election isn't about us and them. It's about you and me and what we want our futures to look like. There are choices to be made when we cast our ballot. Now, there's a certain candidate that says if we just go to the polls this one time, that we'll never have to do it again. Well, you know what? You're looking at a registered independent who's proud to vote again and again and again because I'm an American and that's what Americans do.
And just as we saw with the Obamas, the electricity on that stage transcended politics and sought to appeal to our decency, our shared humanity, and yes, our joy, whether it was a neighbor talking about how Governor Walz pushed him out of a snowbank, or the football team Governor Walz helped coach to a national state championship, or Governor Walz's family and his son Gus overcome when his dad took the stage. But nothing blew the roof off quite like Coach Walz himself and the pep talk that this splintered nation never knew how desperately it needed.
You know, you might not know it, but I haven't given a lot of big speeches like this. But I have given a lot of pep talks. So let me finish with this, team. It's the fourth quarter. We're down a field goal, but we're on offense and we've got the ball. We're driving down the field. And boy, do we have the right team. Kamala Harris is tough. Kamala Harris is experienced, and Kamala Harris is ready. Our job for everyone watching is to get in the trenches and do the blocking and tackling. 1 inch at a time, 1 yard at a time, 1 phone call at a time, 1 door knock at a time, 1 $5 donation at a time. Look, we got 76 days. That's nothing. There'll be time to sleep when you're dead. We're going to leave it on the field. That's how we'll keep moving forward. That's how we'll turn the page on Donald Trump. That's how we'll build a country where workers come first. Health care and housing are human rights. And the government stays the hell out of your bedroom. That's how we make America a place where no child is left hungry, where no community is left behind, where nobody gets told they don't belong. That's how we're going to fight. And as the next president of the United States always says, when we fight, thank you. God bless.
That's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Out in Chicago, former Atlanta mayor and senior advisor to the Harris-Walz campaign, Keisha Lance Bottoms, is here with us. Plus, former U.S. Senator, co-host of MSNBC's How to Win 2024 podcast, Claire McCaskill, is back, and NBC's Yamiche Alcindor will join us in just a few minutes. Claire, I start with you. And as a mom, I will confess my ugly tears when Hope and Gus were overcome with emotion at seeing their very normal dad out on that biggest stage in American politics.
Yeah, this week has been, for me, like laughing and crying. It's like, how can you not tear up watching Gus and his love just spew forth? And by the way, can I just mention something?
Of course.
The Democratic Party has taken over both freedom and football. Who would have thunk? Who would have thunk that our party would steal so effectively freedom and football from the Republicans? I love it because I love freedom, and as you know, I'm a ridiculous football fan.
It's pretty amazing, Keisha, that we're at this place where that's not even a debate, right? I mean, what the Harris-Walz campaign has accomplished in such a short time that they've both been on the ticket is really nothing short of communications mastery. The vice president has seized the mantle of freedom with a small assist from Beyonce. The idea that when we fight, we win, and the really amazing, I think, 9-year effort of how to tackle Donald Trump has been solved in 5 weeks. Simply shrink him down to size and then treat him like you would any bully.
It's almost like it's been divine timing. It has all come together perfectly. And the important thing is this is when we need that momentum. Now we just got to keep it going. It's great that we're excited that we are in this arena in the city that's full of energy. But now we got to take it back to our communities because it's not over until it's over. But boy, it's just a great way to kick off the rest of the campaign season.
Claire, I want to play a little bit more of what I think is sort of a convention's hardest effort, and that is to sustain the energy, or maybe the better way to put it is to convert the energy and the production value. Pink is doing a walkthrough behind you, to convert that into political activity, which is far more mundane than being in this sort of throbbing, pulsing 4-day party. So let me play you some of what Walz asked everyone there to do.
So while other states were banning books from their schools, we were banishing hunger from ours. We also protected reproductive freedom because in Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and the personal choices they make. And even if we wouldn't make those same choices for ourselves, we've got a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. Take Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Their Project 2025 will make things much, much harder for people who are just trying to live their lives. They spent a lot of time pretending they know nothing about this. But look, I coached high school football long enough to know, and trust me on this, when somebody takes the time to draw up a playbook, they're going to use it. Here's the thing. It's an agenda nobody asked for. Is it weird? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's also wrong. And it's dangerous. So here, this is the part, clip and save it and send it to your undecided relatives so they know. If you're a middle-class family or a family trying to get into the middle class, Kamala Harris is going to cut your taxes. If you're getting squeezed by prescription drug prices, Kamala Harris is going to take on Big Pharma. If you're hoping to buy a home, Kamala Harris is going to help make it more affordable.
Every night, Claire, there's been at least one. I mean, I think Michelle Obama did it on Tuesday night, as did former President Obama. But last night it was the vice presidential nominee himself who said, here's what you're going to clip and share. And I feel like this is the first convention really produced for that purpose, as well as for the sort of sustained attention of everyone in the room and all of our viewers.
Yeah, and I do think it's going to be really important for people to leave this auditorium, go home, and hang out in red places for a few days, just to get the sugar high out of their system and realize we have work to do. And I think it's important for people to know, when you sign up to volunteer, nobody's going to make you volunteer to do anything you're not comfortable with. I think a lot of people hesitate because they think, well, I don't want to knock on a door, or I don't want to do this. They will be able to utilize you in a way that you are comfortable, even if it's just finding 10 people to register to vote. This is far from over, and people need to realize that. It's really important that people don't go from here thinking, okay, we've got this. It's all done. And by the way, while I'm talking about it, when he rang out those policy points, I don't want to hear another word from the Republicans saying that we don't have the details of our policy. Donald Trump said, I think in 2016, he'd have his health care plan in 2 weeks. We've never seen a health care plan from Donald Trump. So this idea that somehow Donald Trump presents policy, no, he's never presented policy in his entire career. It's about him and grievance, period. So stop yammering about having the details of policy.